of gaming is full of passionate gamers. Gamers who will create their own fan games based on their favorite IPs, and gamers who will reverse engineer their favorite games for the purposes of preservation. Are these really worth covering? And if they're worth covering, what fan games or reverse engineered games should you play? And most importantly, is it worth the effort to play these on your Steam Deck? If you like my content, please like, subscribe, share with your friends, and join my Discord server in the description below. As you may have noticed, I am now affiliated with the Steam Deck Discord. Links in the description below. First, let's talk about fan games. And in this case, I don't mean ROM hacks. I mean fully original fan games. Games like Pokemon Uranium, Hyper Dragon Ball Z, another Metroid 2 remake, Castlevania, The Lacard Chronicles 1 and 2, and many, many others. So oftentimes fan games, much like real games, are designed for Windows only. And much like a lot of Windows only games, these fan games will also work under Proton as well, despite not having specific fixes for said games. That said, there are truly a ton of fan games out there, and unlike actual Steam games, there's not a community out there dedicating themselves to testing out all of these fan games and seeing if they run or not. So your mileage may vary. That said, a lot of bigger fan games tend to have Linux ports. For example, another Metroid 2 remake, aka AM2R, has a native Linux port, albeit unofficial, mostly due to the fact that it's open source. However, there is a pain point with these fan games sometimes, due to the fact that most of these fan games tend to be based on highly profitable and highly popular franchises. Some overprotective companies, such as Nintendo of all companies, believes that, well, basically, you shouldn't make fan games of their games at all. That said, the process of actually playing fan games may not always be so easy, and it highly varies depending on what fan game you want to play, especially if you want to use a native Linux version of a fan game. But if you opt for the easy solution and, just download the Windows version, it's as easy as adding it to Steam as a non-Steam game, and then you would have the game use a version of Steam Play, which is what Steam calls Proton. So totally original fan games are pretty cool, and some of them may even be considered great, such as AM2R. But there's arguably a more interesting development going on. Fans are reverse engineering games, clean room of course, and then they're recreating that game's specific engine from scratch, and they turned it into an open source re-implementation of the game. What do I mean? Well, I'll show you. So I'm going to get this out of the way first. The Doom engine is open source, so it's not reverse engineered. But there are a bevy of open source re-implementations of the Doom engine, many of which support multiple mods for Doom, as well as, the original Doom assets. Now here are the more interesting ports. So here are open source re-implementations of game engines that used to be proprietary, but were clean room reverse engineered, which, by the way, is legal, so long as you're not distributing old assets from said games as well. Games like Super Mario 64, The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, The Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask, Diablo 1, and Diablo 2, The Elder Scrolls 3, Morrowind, and many, many others that I don't know about. So in theory, these re-implemented engines can be ported to basically any device. Like Super Mario 64 used to be an N64 only game, but with a new open source re-implementation, you can theoretically port it onto anything. Windows, Linux, Android, Mac OS, other homebrew systems like the PS Vita, and many, many others. Here's the real caveat. You're not going to find executable files because more often than not, you have to compile them yourself. You have to have original assets, whether in the form of like a ROM for retro games or in the form of the original games installed for retro PC games. So to that end, providing executables created with these original assets is in fact almost as illegal as distributing the ROMs, if not as illegal. That said, there is a bunch of reading you have to do. Worst comes to worst, if you have a programmer friend, you could probably get him to compile it for you and give you the exe. Thanks to the fact that these projects are open source, you can actually modify these engines, you could add mods, you could make the games widescreen when they weren't before. and so on and so forth. I look forward to playing the ported version of Ocarina of Time on my Steam Deck, all natively, with widescreen, heck, maybe even some graphical enhancements. Maybe with a cool 60 frames per second too. Like Ocarina of Time I believe runs at like what, 20 frames per second? I don't even remember, but I know it's not 30 FPS either. So do yourself a favor and Google these pages. I'll have links in the description to these various projects' GitHub pages, so be sure to check them out. Till then, happy gaming!